All right, we're back for part two.
All right.
Now, just to recap part one of the podcast, we talked about your adventures in Japan and the Marine Corps. And if anybody wants to know about that, they could go back to part one and listen to that,
Yeah,
right? Because we're
yeah,
not going to
yeah.
go over all of that stuff.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, so what I want to kick off today with is after you left the Marine Corps, you went back, or did you go back? Did you go back as a Marine and you left the Marine Corps? Let's start from there.
Yeah. When I got out, when I was the enlistment was up, you have a choice at that time to reenlist or not reenlist. So that was when I was debating on, moving forward with the martial arts life and maybe opening a gym. And I had the blessing, like I said before, from Tommy. Tommy Mossman was one who I considered my main coach at the time, who I respected a lot. So he had a small gym off of Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina. So yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps. I decided to get out of the Marine Corps and move on and get into this fight thing, which was very unpredictable. And the Marine Corps seemed very predictable. They tell you where to be, what to do. You know what you're going to get paid, and this thing seemed a lot more exciting. So, although I really enjoyed my time in the Corps, I was just ready to move on. I think there was a little conflict of interest at the end of me doing these competitions and wanting to go outside and compete and things like that. And the government puts money into training you, so you come back injured. It's not a good thing. So, yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps honorable discharge. So I did my time in, and then I got out and I drove back from Camp Lejeune to Toledo, Ohio. Um, Moved in back in with the folks. The plan was just to kind of stay there for a few months and look for a space to open a gym up, and that's what I did. It was 1998, I believe, 98 of November. So
So opening a gym was already in your mind before you even went back to your hometown.
yeah, I wanted to have a gym. I knew I wanted to have a gym mainly to build a network. Like there just wasn't full contact back in Toledo, Ohio, and even in the surrounding areas. You had still a lot of traditional martial arts. So what I'd been doing in the service, I couldn't continue with, especially back in the hometown. So yeah, I wanted to teach some guys some basics. I wanted to make a living doing that. But I was also working other jobs. I also went to work, to make sure that I could supplement the income when I opened the facility up.
All right, so you go back, you're getting your bearings, you're staying with your folks, you're looking for places. What were some of the criteria of finding a location? Did you have everything kind of set in your mind what you wanted, or was it just like you're doing it on the fly?
A lot of it was on the fly. I thought I knew what I wanted. Going into it, I'd been in enough gyms and had an idea of what the place needed to look like space wise. I was really open to whatever I could get myself into really cheap and build up. It was a very small facility in the first place. Um, so yeah, I went back just looking for anything that I could basically afford. I went and took a loan from a Catholic credit union, and that was my first like startup with a little bit of money I had from the Marine Corps for that facility. It was like $5,000 loan that I had taken out to get the gym going. Just looking around and asking, I come from Toledo, so we were originally from there. Although I moved a lot, I had a lot of longtime friends or acquaintances in Toledo, so everybody kind of put, their ear to the grindstone, so to speak, to try to find something for me. A good friend of mine, Dean Mohalski, his sister, she was a dog groomer, and she would rent this space out, and she had a little space in the back that she lived. She converted into a small apartment, and she was moving. She was relocating, so I went over to check this space out. It was a former Marine. He was a Marine like myself, quite a bit older, I think, around Vietnam era time, and his name was Bob, and he was just really great to me. We You know, we shared some stories. I looked at the space, and he was very lenient on, you know, what he would charge me and how that would work out. And he helped me out a lot in the beginnings when I rented that space from him. Very small space. We tore some walls down and changed things around a bit, but yeah, it was perfect for the time. You know, very very small, but yeah, I had everything at that point I needed, other than like proper equipment. You know, so it was pretty hardcore. I remember us going to look for matting. You know, like they couldn't get like the jigsaw mats and all the tatami style mats, so we just took like a indoor golf green, which was a horrible idea. It felt kind of, you know, like you could, it was a bit of like a mat, but the surface would rip your feet completely off. So, you know, we were running around on that stuff, and guys had duct tape feet in that gym, and it was pretty hardcore. I wasn't a big believer in pads and that kind of stuff because of the background I came from. So I really like going back now, I really think about those first 20 or 30 guys, man. I give a lot of love and respect for them putting up with my shit, and just some of the crazy stuff and how we trained back then. So
Yeah, get into the training of the first couple of months that you had your gym open, and kind of the obstacles that you had to overcome, and because was it the first time you were a full-time instructor, right, at that
sure.
gym?
Sure. I mean, I did some teaching for Tommy. You know, I was doing that towards the end too, and taking classes, and that was building a lot of my confidence. Plus the Marine Corps, you know, this is something we do all the time, is stand in front of other Marines, and if you're any type of instructor. So that stuff was, I felt really comfortable with that. But, you know, I looked like I was probably 12 years old at 20, 23, 24 years old. And I think the biggest thing was that, you know, for guys to come in to enroll and see this kid standing there that had this crazy life experience already, but pretty hard to swallow, you know, to listen to a kid that age. You know, I've been here, I've done this, I've done that. So I did get some enrollment, but you know, Toledo's a tough town. It's a lot of factory workers, and it's very like blue collar, and you know, pipe fitters and welders and construction guys. So I had a lot of tough guys come in, a lot of tough guys. Um, and yeah, back then I ran a 3 hour class. So we didn't do, you know, different classes like today with different schedules, a 3 hour block. And we would mix that 3 hours up into like knockdown karate, kickboxing, and then we would open it up to like wrestling and like free fighting, you know, which is MMA basically, with very, very, very watered down ground fighting application. But um, I'd say the biggest obstacles are probably just the traditional guys in the community heard about me really quick. I became sort of like the Cobra Kai guys, you know, a bad guy, you know, because I believed in the customs and I liked the traditions, like I said before, but you know, we're about kicking the legs and kicking the inside leg and throwing guys, and like, and a lot of those techniques just weren't, they were kind of frowned upon in traditional martial arts, you know. So we trained really different than the other facilities, so it was a very very different thing. um yeah, sorry, I got a little distracted here. I got someone knocking. um
It's all good.
yeah, man, so the classes were pretty hardcore, I'd have to say. You know, traditional bare knuckle stuff, very similar to like Oyama, Ashiwara karate, like you'd see in Sabaki or Masoyama. So a lot of conditioning, a lot of shin conditioning, things like that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This will not happen again. I'm gonna yell at somebody. Okay, I'm back. I apologize.
All right.
I'm
Well, with you know, with the local martial arts, the traditionalists, right? You said that you became kind of the Cobra Kai, the bad guys of the city. Did they ever approach you, or it was just something you heard around town?
No, yeah, we would get like this really goofy, you know, I think this still kind of happens in the States, but you know, other gyms would send students over, you know, to act, they want to take a free class, or they want to see how many numbers we have, what we're doing in there. And I had a lot of those guys come down. It was really kind of a goofy time. And, you know, I was really wired. I was a pretty aggressive guy, you know, and I had very little tolerance for certain things, especially in my dojo or my gym, you know. So back then, it was a bit of the Wild West stuff. There was definitely gym fights that would happen. There was sort of like gym challenges, similar to like the Gracie thing that came out later, but guys would just want to come in and check me. And I can totally understand. Looking back, it's like I looked like a little kid, running a gym. Um, but yeah, there was some pretty wild battles in there. And the guys that stuck with me, that were really loyal, they all seem to go pretty far in the martial arts in some way or another, but yeah, they would send guys down. And it just got really goofy. They do like sort of conventions around, where martial art conventions and things like that. And we were definitely sort of the black seed, like people really didn't want us involved in tournaments, invitations for like open tournaments. There was a couple of guys that were trying to establish some kickboxing, I believe, back then. But yeah, we weren't getting those invites just because we had a reputation that we fought. And yeah, I was teaching the guys to fight, not just in the gym, but to take care of themselves outside the gym. And I just didn't believe in that, giving guys three chances. And when someone, pushes you, we go first, we go hard, and we eliminate the threat, and that's what I was teaching. So I think that just, in being young, the other guys, they didn't really like me around much. Plus, I was getting quite a bit of attention. Not in the very beginning, I'd say about 6 months to 8 months in. A lot of guys were jumping ship to come over and train with us. So, and those guys lost some students. So I think that caused a little rift as well.
Did you see that guy in China? The last year or so, he's been challenging all the traditionalists.
I just
In,
seen this
in, in
guy
have you
recently.
seen some of those fights?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And he's just beating the shit out of those guys,
yeah,
man. It's just
yeah,
like it sucks to see that, because a lot of people, they really believe in those martial arts, that you can use it effectively against somebody that is a mixed martial artist, right, that has
yeah.
learned many disciplines, and they're seeing it on video on the internet that, hey, some of
It's
that stuff is fake.
it's wild for me to still see that happens today. That still exists. And I've been there. I've trained a lot of traditional arts. Once I started to learn, like, how to apply this stuff like full contact, I could go back into those arts. I could go back into that reservoir and find ways to use that material. But yeah, man, it's this guy I've just seen recently, who you're talking about, and it is pretty brutal. It's hard to watch, but at the same time, it's like, how long is it going to be before we start to like evolve? Like MMA is the Gracies themselves have like bringing this thing to it. There's more evolution in martial arts in the last 15 years than there was in 1,000 years before that. So yeah, it's pretty wild, man. And I've been there. I've been in that situation. I deal with it a little different. I don't go out of the house to like look for that thing, but if it comes to the gym, by all means, we're always willing to like show that what our stuff is effective. I think that's important. Where before that, I had to just listen to those instructors. I had to believe. I couldn't question them. And if you did, you weren't a very good student. And but it's just all the things that I remember going through, like the whole dim mock stuff, right? The death touch, or like moving energy and all this. Yeah, I feel like when I got to a point in martial arts, I realized what was the holistic aspects, what movement was for like the mind and the body, and what was for fighting. And I just think somewhere down the line, people confuse those things, and teachers would spread knowledge that were like holistic movement, a lot of like Chinese kung fu, that doesn't have the fighting application part, But yeah, it's still going on. It's still going on out here in Southeast Asia for sure too. It's going on in Singapore. I've been to places where this still exists, and there's still people like throwing fireballs, or they think they can, which is just absurd.
In your gym, what was one of the wildest moments of somebody coming in to your establishment, your home, and challenging you, or challenging one of your students? Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't just challenging you, it must have been challenging your students too.
Absolutely. Aaron Fisher, love you, Aaron, if you're out there listening. Aaron has a facility called King's Muay Thai in New York City. And Aaron was my longest student. He came to me around 19 years of age, stayed with me a long time, near almost 12 years, and he lived with me in Thailand and fought. And he was my go-to. He became my right arm. And those guys usually get stuck with those challenge positions quite often, you know? Like, okay, well, if you can go beat up my guy, then you come see me and we'll talk about it. So Aaron Aaron had a lot of gym wars, absolutely. And I did as well. And I'd say the worst one that sticks out still today was a pretty big gentleman that came in, pretty rough guy. I think he was a pipe fitter and worked a really rough, tough job. And he did some tough man, we used to call it in the States. It was like 3-round amateur boxing fights where these guys would just come off the bar stool and punch each other for, a grand prize. But he had done things like that. So in his world, he was a pretty experienced fighter and came into class about midway through and was being real rude. I had a little area where the guys could sit off to the side and observe until after class and they could speak to me about sessions or whatever. And he was like interrupting the class and he was, things like that. And got pretty rude to where I asked the students to go outside and Dean and Aaron were just inside to lock up the facility. And I asked him to sign the waiver and we could get on the mat, but no gloves, no pads. We were going to do this properly. And he agreed to. And that was a pretty a nasty thing for him. He was a quite big guy, but he just didn't have the knowledge. It's like, it's just not fair. It's like taking candy from a kid, I guess you'd say. He gave up a decent struggle because he was a big guy, quite a bit bigger than me. But I think his feet were broken. He had some other issues by the time that was done. And yeah, it was rough, man. I drug him outside in front of the gym and left him there and had all the students come back inside. I didn't do it in front of everyone, just my 2 top guys. But that was probably one of the wildest times. Nothing legally came back on me or anything like that over it, so that was great. But he was pretty banged up. Yeah.
How did the business go? Like you said you had like 20, 30 students, and students started to come over.
Yeah.
Was the business self-sustaining or did you have a lot of struggles as time went by?
Never. So it's never good. My idea of business was like, very little education in that sense. And I thought, well, this has got to be easy. You just give me $60, $70 a month and I teach you. No books, no receipts, no accounting, what do you need all that stuff for? So I ran the business, basically cash would come in and that cash would be spent on day-to-day living. And this became a huge problem for me. It was about, I left the Marine Corps with a nice new car and good credit and all that stuff. And it just started to chew me apart. And I had this thing in me about martial arts where it was really hard to accept money from people that had, troubled situations, whether it was at home or, so I had a lot of kids cleaning mirrors and washing, things that didn't need to be cleaned and create jobs so that I felt like there was an exchange there. But yeah, it just slowly started to tear me up little by little. So I would go out and work. I would work construction. I worked at a nuclear security power plant for a while. I did things that I had to so I could, supplement the income. But it never made, like the gym itself was never lucrative at all for me.
So how long did it take for you to realize, or we're to the point where you were like, okay, I'm going to go out to the West Coast? Tell us like the timeline of that.
That was more my personal journey of wanting to like test it out and be a professional fighter, because before then there was fights, but they were all considered amateur. Even like the knockdown karate stuff. I mean, you weren't a professional fighter like a boxer. And I didn't really know how to get there. I didn't know how that worked, other than seeing guys like Cung and guys like that on Strike Force. I thought, wow, these guys are obviously already professional prize fighters. They've got titles. So that sort of brought my attention to those things on the West Coast. It was primarily Strike Force because ESPN2 back in the day picked up these these fights that they would hold, and they'd re-air them. And that's when I was catching like Thai boxing, San Chow, whatever it was, martial arts at that time. And everything seemed to be out west. Everything I seen was like guys from the West Coast. So I thought, man, I'm definitely not going to get found here in Toledo, Ohio, in this little, fish pond. So I started to just look into the gyms out there, and through the magazines. I think like all martial artists back then, your black belt, your inside kung fu, some of your major magazines that you get your information from. And, at the time, Kung was all over those things. I mean, he seemed to be on the cover of every damn magazine you could look at. Um, and also I seen a glimpse of Alex Gong, from Ferritex, and no one was doing what Alex was doing at the time that I'm aware of, with a live-in camp and importing Thai guys like Jung Sana, who's famous boxer who's been in the States for a long time. He has his own facility now. But a lot of the original guys, Alex had a lot to do with bringing those Thai people over to the West Coast. So that was sort of how that started to manifest, and I thought, okay, how do I reach out to these guys and they can like assist me? I can go train with them and I can become a pro fighter. There was nothing in my town that would direct you that way. Just amateur events or just like you'd see anywhere else. The stuff that I already been doing, and as well, Shidokan wasn't considered professional, even though you had like some prize money at the end of that, some events like that, Sabaki Challenge, but still, again, I wanted to be a pro fighter, a prize fighter, and just test my mettle, like see if I could stand in the same arena as these guys that I admired that were doing.
Why was all the professional shows and the pretty much the elite gyms all out West Coast? Why is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that's where all the publishing companies for the magazines were. That's where all the fine, like now after I went to Kung Lee, it was a huge, huge education. I didn't know how this worked. I thought like you go to a gym, you train, someone discovers you, and you become like this fighter, this celebrity. And it's then I realized that, oh, this guy's his friend, and they pay for ads in the magazine, and these are all bought ads, and they don't find you and choose you to put you on a cover. It's all for sale, and this is all business and marketing. And it really was pretty brutal. It's like finding out there's no Santa Claus. I was pretty bummed out. I was like, this is how this all works. It's like who you know and who you run with. And that's why I'd say like the exposure of the West Coast was right there in your face, because no one else was going to ESPN to buy spots or time, like you would on a TV channel for commercials. So Scott Coker was a genius back then. He was really on the front of this stuff, and he was a very close friend of Kung Lee. I believe even a student of Kung's at one point. And he had quite a network in California to get that exposure. Same with Alex Gong, those guys were in the hot spot for martial art magazines. All that stuff that you were going to get that we're going to go into the rest of the states came from the West Coast primarily. So yeah, it was, I had no idea how the business worked until I went and moved out there to stay with Kung and train. And that's when I was exposed to how the business stuff kind of worked, and promoters and the IKF, ISKA, and all these sort of organizations, and how you got on those cards, how you fought on those cards. You had to be training with one of those gyms. It was just a network that they started themselves. If you were in that network, you're good to go. If you weren't, you were never going to get any exposure.
In part one, you delved into how you contacted Fairtex first. It didn't work out with them. So you contacted Cung. Cung opened his doors to you. You moved out there and you stayed with one of his students. Like, start off, you land in California. You meet Cung for the first time face to face. Kind of start from there. Can you explain what happened after that?
Yeah. At first, I lived in like an extended stay until I was in the gym, I think. Not long, maybe roughly a week or two. And then I moved in with a student in the family. But the original day I arrive, I get my stuff put into the hotel. I get over to the gym and I was just excited, and a bit starstruck. I had really seen a lot of Kung on TV, and where I come from, obviously, like we live through a television. It's like Midwest guys, like that's not obtainable. So that was sort of my first like taste of, wow, this guy's a bit of a superstar. He had a really big facility in like a shopping plaza, and he had a lot of students, man. I mean, this Kung had billboards in San Jose of himself back then, and he had like a huge following, huge community. I guess it's one of the largest communities outside of Vietnam, Vietnamese community. So he had a lot of support. It was very cool. But we talked a bit. I met his wife, his original wife. She helped manage the gym. And Giovanni, he came in probably only 15 minutes after I arrived. And I just was hanging out in sort of the reception area, chatting with them about how how we would work the training out and things like that. And yeah, I was a bit starstruck. I was a bit excited, but I kind of kept it under wraps. I didn't want anybody to know, hey, I'm here. I'm one of the guys. And I got a little bit of resistance from the team. I was Ohio boy, so they nicknamed me Ohio. Hey, Ohio, hey, Ohio. Everything was, what's up, Ohio? And they were real clicked up, the West Coast guys, super clicked up. But after a while, eventually, I think I worked my way into the group a bit, and things got a bit cooler. It was crazy. The first, week for me, I've never, even in the Marine Corps, did some pretty crazy training, put my body through some pretty rough stuff. But this was the first time I had like athletic, like conditioning and training, strength and conditioning, and like 2-a-days, 2 sessions per day. Morning session with Giovanni. You'll see if you watch some of Kung's old stuff, there's a big black guy who's always patting him and training him. And that was his head guy. And Giovanni would train myself and Rudy Ott, who was another fighter who stayed with Kung for many years. And we would train in the morning, and maybe a few other people would jump in from the fight team, but it was mainly just Rudy and I and Giovanni. And we would go to San Jose State and do like stadium workouts and kick pads and run bleachers. It was horrible. I would go back to the room and look in the mirror and literally have a conversation with myself, like, this ain't for me, probably, man. Let's just pack your shit up and go back home. Like, you can teach this stuff, but maybe you're just not cut out. I had lots of questions. I was in a lot of pain. I mean, just rolling out of bed. I couldn't sit up out of bed. I'd literally have to roll off the damn mattress and go through that day in and day out. And I thought, man, but eventually my body started to adapt to it, and I got stronger and stronger. And yeah, it was a really awesome experience. It taught me a lot. West Coasters were really into nutrition. This movement hit the West Coast way before the Midwest. Still to this day, people are eating pizza and chain smoking cigarettes where I'm from. So we just ate food and we trained. This was the first time I started taking some supplements. Giovanni had me doing wheatgrass shots and eating healthy and eating on a schedule. All that was new for me. All that was absolutely new for me. And yeah, Kung just promised to open some doors for me. And if I could hold my own, he would assist in that, and he got me my first professional license through the state of California to compete as a professional fighter. So Kung did all that for me.
So what year is this? Because, man, nutrition, wheatgrass shots. I don't think people even said those words, in martial arts or even
True,
conducted
right?
anything like that.
Kung was a specimen, man. Like, if you look at Kung back then versus like just other athletes, it was insane. People would say for sure now anabolics or whatever it is, but like when I was with Kung, I know Kung was very clean, eat clean. I mean, his whole life, there was no burgers and fries and stuff like that, and I just ate what I wanted. I just would eat what I want and train. I had a pretty good metabolism, but I didn't look like these guys. I mean, his amateur team looked like professional guys. They were ripped out like Thai boxers, man. You could see every muscle in their body. And yeah, he was like super in front of that whole. And Giovanni was a bodybuilder. Giovanni was a giant man, I think near 260 pounds. And he was just a big ball of muscle. So he, I think, influenced Kung a lot with strength and conditioning, We would go to those track workouts and push football sleds. We did all kinds of different stuff that I'd never done other than just applying the fight stuff. I didn't do that type of conditioning, which is all, sparring or makawari work or, very little conditioning in comparison. So this had to have been in 1999, I would say. If we look back on the IKF when I fought Alaro, it was just before this fight that I'd stayed with Cung. So yeah, man, I think he was way ahead of the game when it came to that type of conditioning. And if you see him when he fought, I mean, I don't think there was a more explosive fighter. Now, a lot of people got exposed to Cung when he was quite old, and he started in Strike Force, the MMA Strike Force, not the kickboxing, right? And then on to the UFC. Guys that really like combat sports, Google Cung Lee and look at his fights in the Shidokan, look at his fights in Draka, look at the fights that he did then. If they would have brought that Cung Lee into the UFC, he had about 6 or 8 years before I think he would have been one of the top 3 guys, no doubt. But age happens. His body went through a ton of wear and tear. He was doing a lot of movie stuff towards that time and balancing like a movie career and then having fights, as well. So his whole body looked different later. He's still a pretty awesome guy, just a little more lethargic. He couldn't do the same things. So I think just Cung was way ahead of the game. And I don't know, I can't tell you exactly who gave him all that information or why, but I know he did wrestling. He was a wrestler. I know he was in Taekwondo. I wouldn't say Taekwondo would offer a lot of that information, it was just guys training hard, but the wrestlers in California are pretty squared away with nutrition and dieting and weight cutting and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that had a lot to do with it. But yeah, he's the one that really exposed me to that world of like nutrition and supplements and amino acids and things that would benefit your body so you can get, you could recover faster. And if I didn't have those things in California, I don't know how I could get up another day because it was already extremely difficult for me. Extremely.
Well, you go through the training, you doubt yourself, you overcome those doubts. Talk about the first fight under the tutelage of Cung.
A big fights in Vallejo. It was, like I said, it was all crazy for me. It was all new for me. And thinking back, it's a bit funny because what I thought it took to fight, how I thought you had to be to fight is so far from where I am today and just my approach, right? I just had to be this caged tiger, right? I had to pace around and like think about how this guy took money from my family or something. I had to hate these people. And I didn't realize till way later that, it was more of an internal thing, a battle with myself and not so much. And I was scared to death of fighting. The reason why I was fighting is because inside I wasn't telling anybody. I was scared. I was scared to fight, and I thought, man, what are you, a coward? What's wrong with you? I would literally like the nausea, my legs would shake. I'd get heavy. Like I thought that was just me, and I'm like, these guys look like nothing. So I'd have to put this show on. And I remember Cung and Giovanni sort of like giving me a little bit of insight then, but they let me do my thing, and I think there was a good crowd, maybe 5,000 people. Wow. And yeah, it was a big crowd in Vallejo, and we went down. It was like a full day thing, kind of hanging out to fight. And he had his whole routine where he had mangoes cut up and Pedialyte to rehydrate. I never did any of this stuff. You just show up, drink water, you fight, and he really like took care of his team and really like, I think taught us a lot in that sense, to prepare. So coming out for that fight was pretty awesome, man. Like I had like a big Gracie sort of wagon of guys behind me and Cung was right next to me. So that was amazing because this is a guy I really admired and thought, wow, this is my big break. There was a promoter from Draka. There was a promotion called Draka. It's a Russian promotion that no longer exists, but Draka meaning just free fighting. And that was another, place that I'd seen Cung fight, and they paid really well for fighting back then. So I remember in that fight, you know, just like constantly looking down at this guy sitting ringside, and really weird things happening during that fight where I was so fit. I was so fit that between the rounds, like just to get some water and breathe, it just wasn't even an issue. So I had it felt like this long amount of time to sit and process things in my head. I remember looking at the ring girl for like, it seemed like 2.5 minutes. I'm like, what are you doing looking at this ring girl, man? You're in a fight. I'm flashing over to seeing Draka promoters and like other people in the crowd, like just like they were sitting next to me, you know. It was a very strange experience, but a very cool experience. So yeah, man, that was the first experience that I can remember with Cung, you know, at an event. And of course, everybody's taking pictures with Cung. Everybody's coming up. He was quite a celebrity at the time. Um, and yeah, it was a huge crowd, bigger than many of the crowds I fought for later, you know, and that was one of the very first big events. So
Now, after that fight, you know, you get over, you make, was that your pro debut? Am I correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, after your pro debut, you know, how many more fights did you have, you know, while
I only,
training with Cung?
yeah, no, I trained with Cung a bit, but only had one other big fight, and that was with Al Laro. And that's when I ripped the tendons in my right elbow. Um, Al came from Jason Yee's group from Boston, and Rudy knew Al. Rudy and Al were training partners, and these guys that were coming over to compete against us. Rudy was kind of a turncoat, maybe what Jason Yee thought, because he left Jason, who was competitive against Cung, and he joined Kung's group around the same time I did. So Rudy was giving me the inside, like, hey, I spar with Al. I know Al's deal, you know. So, but I wasn't sure, you know. I was Ohio. I was still the guy like inside the team, but not really like in my own mind. I'm like, man, are these guys setting me up? Like these are his international teammates. These guys traveled together and fought San Shao international, like amateur San Shao. And yeah, Kung's like, yeah, you're gonna fight Al Laro, and it's for the vacant IKF San Shao pro title. It'll be the first pro title for San Shao. And we sat that day on the board with Steve Fossman and came up with the rules for professional, because people were, should we throw knees or not? That was a big thing for San Shao because of the throws. There was no knee strikes, and you know, I wanted to have everything. And guys that were the Kung and himself were like, no, you know, we should have this. This is Chinese kickboxing. So yeah, man, I had that fight. I was doing really well. I'm sure it's somewhere out there. I've got some old footage of it somewhere. Um, and I think it was second round. I had a really good first round. I was really working his leg a lot, and I was catching him with some good hooks. And he threw me once for some points. And then we come out in the second, and yeah, again, I just remember being so fit and thinking, what am I going to do to impress these guys? The scissor takedown, of course. Kung's patented, like, and it probably worked for me 2 or 3 times in the gym. I had some confidence in it. I think even Cung at one point let me like put it on him, like let me, you know, thinking about it now. And yeah, I just remember, okay, I'm gonna do this scissor takedown. Everybody's gonna embrace. So I remember going in. We exchanged some punches, and he catches me with the hook. I catch him with the hook. We separate, and he starts to come in, and I dive in to do the scissor takedown. When I hit his torso with like my pelvic area and bounced back. And when I went to brace on my right arm to catch myself, it snapped the ligaments in my right elbow. So I'm down on the mat and I'm sort of on one knee. My shoulder's a bit low, and the ref comes over, and I think he thinks my shoulder's dislocated. And he takes my hand and he straightens my elbow, and it just felt like a guitar string pop. It was bad. So they call the fight. I forget how that all worked out, because it was in the second round. If it was actually like, if it went down as a wash, or they go to the scorecards at that point because it was, you know, an injury. But I know I disputed it back then at some point, because I felt like, you know, I was pretty bummed out. So they rush me to the emergency room. I get casted up. I go back to the gym the following day, sort of with my, you know, my head down, and you know, I got to go home. I can't sit for 6 months in Kung's gym, and this is the time I got to pack up and head home. And I was very, very depressed. And going back, I thought, that was it for me. My shot at that time, that was my shot. I didn't realize that this just continues on and on, but that was everything. So that hit me hard. And I went home and I went back to the gym and started to do the gym thing again. Dean was taking care of things for me at the time. He was kind of my head student, so he was running the gym. And I went back and I had the arm casted out, and I really started to I was stubborn. I didn't take time off then for things like that. I would just tape the arm up and, spar anyway with the left side. Just please, guys, don't hit the hand. And I was supposed to get a surgery, and I never got the surgery on the elbow, and I rehabbed it myself using all kinds of crazy old methods and stuff. And today, it's here, and I can punch with it. Sure, it doesn't feel the same 100%, but that was a huge turning point for me. Then I understood sort of the prize fighting world, how that worked, went back home, had a bunch of new stuff to teach my guys, but really had time to develop the left side of my body. I really relied on my right side for pretty much everything. And now it's the opposite. Now it's absolute opposite. So yeah, man, that was the first sort of experience. And then going back home and having to hit the reset button and, and start teaching and healing. And once I was healed, I started to look for competitions again, mainly in Kentucky. There was a promoter, Rodney Finn. Wasn't many shows. There really wasn't. Atlanta, Georgia, Lane Collier, Rodney Finn was a promoter. And these guys were promoting under the ISKA or the IKF. Those were the two sort of big ones that you could sanction fights through, that guys wanted to fight for. We recognize those titles as legitimate titles. So yeah.
Why did you decide not to go back to Cung Lee and train over there as a professional?
That's a great question. Just life started to happen back home, and I was getting some competing with Rodney. I had a pretty good network, and at that time, truly, I felt like, yeah, I was there with the guys, but I really wasn't a part of the family, the West Coast family. I did always feel like there was a little distance between being completely accepted into that group, and I started to, have my own group of guys, and definitely that trip gave me a lot of confidence, that I could do this, that I understood how it works now. And, I could call some of these people to promote myself and things. And that's when I was doing news interviews on Toledo 11 at home. I started to do press releases for myself to get on sports news. All this stuff was done, you do it yourself, you send it in, and if they got a spot. So I started to get a little bit of not celebrity status, but for my small town, if somebody sees you on TV talking about martial arts or whatever, you're the man. So yeah, I was pretty happy, and I didn't feel like I needed to go back, although I was in a lot of contact with the IKF and shows out in the West. They were starting to do shows everywhere. Guys were picking them up to do in the Midwest and South. So, but yeah, I didn't feel the calling to go back. Ran into Cung, I think maybe 2 years after at the Arnold Classic. He would bring his guys down to do the Sanshao fights, and we ended up fighting each other, his guys and my guys, and we won. Sorry, Cung. We took it that year. And I was so proud of that, because when they came in, I was still Ohio, hey, it's Ohio's group. And then Rudy was now a part of his group, and he was kind of taking care of a lot of Kung's stuff. So Rudy was kind of the main guy that Cung would rely on. And we were coaching opposite, our guys. And yeah, because I respected him so much. And I didn't get shunned by him, but, when I see him at the Classic, hey, Cung, it was almost like, yeah, okay, he remembers me, but slowly but surely, his life got pretty complicated, and he became really famous really fast, I think. So I just didn't feel the calling to go back out, and work with those guys.
But the trip was very beneficial. On top of, elevating your martial arts status and your skill set, you went to basically the business school of martial arts over there.
Yes. And man, I went and bought the cardio paddles. I started to teach cardio classes. Like, I thought that was selling out. I thought people that did any of that were garbage and they sold out. But when I walk into a gym and I respect this guy and I see him knocking people out, and he's got knee pads on, 2 pairs of shin guards, headgear, 16-ounce boxing gloves, I thought, what the hell are these pussies doing? Like, I don't, excuse my language. But they, like, this is crazy. I show up with, like, no groin cup, no gum shield, maybe an 8 or 10-ounce glove, and Cung like chews my ass out. He's like, "Are you out here trying to hurt my guys? What are you showing up on the mat like that?" And I'm like, "Dude, we don't even wear gloves, And I thought that gave me a lot of confidence in a way. Like, wow, these guys are. But then I realized, like, I learned so much from them. I learned so much of how you save your body for the fight. If you're already tough, what's the point to do that in the gym? You're not getting paid for it. And it's going to, like, your career is going to be very short. So not only did I learn about protecting my guys and training another way, but his business model. Cung made money in a gym, and nobody made money in a gym. You just did it, and if you broke even and you had to get another job, that's the gyms that I was exposed to. So, man, he had 200-300 people. So those classes would be full, and he diversified. He had the kids program, he had the fighters classes, he had a cardio paddle that he invented. It looked like a Taekwondo kick paddle, but he put his logo on it, and it had two. They'd slap and clap and make loud thunder noise. And he came up with like routines on these cardio paddles, and these classes were packed in certification programs. And I went and bought, I think, 50 paddles from Cung, and went back and started to do that as well, to make my classes, to enroll more people that weren't necessarily looking to fight but wanted to train. So that changed lots of stuff. It definitely taught me a lot about the business and the marketing, for sure, and how the marketing worked and how you get exposure. You don't just sit there and wait for somebody to walk in your gym and find you. So
You
thank
go
you.
back, you're creating your own team. You do well because you just mentioned that you met Kung's team at the Arnold Classic and you defeated them. During that period, what years is this going on? Probably like 2000 to when?
Yeah, this all happens in between 90, I'd say 98 and 2000, because 2001, I believe now I'm finally retrieving a lot of the documents and some old passport stuff so I can get the exact dates of when I arrived to Rawai Muay Thai. But it was close around that time, that's when I started to look at like Thailand, maybe taking a trip to get away. My whole thing was taking trips like that to go see Cung or go see anybody, whether it was just a weekend. I also did that with Pat Miletich. And Pat Miletich, that was old school, right? That was Jeremy Horn, Jen Pulver. So I went out and stayed with him for not long at all, but I would go out and take trips like that to just meet other fighters and learn stuff. And I went out and stayed with Pat during this time. I went out and stayed with, man, it was quite a few different gyms where I would stay. He was in Iowa, so it wasn't too far from Ohio. And I went out there with a gentleman, Dave Nags, who was fighting in the King of the Cage. That was like one of the premier MMA organizations just coming up. It may have been called Gladiator Challenge even, but it was King of the Cage, essentially. So yeah, man, the team was doing great. They were competing a lot. I was competing, but on and off. The pressure of having the gym, the pressure of fighting in the States was like really hard for me. Like mentally, I thought if I was going to lose, like what happened with Al, nobody's going to come train with me. Nobody's going to want to learn from a guy that's losing, right? So I put a lot of weight on myself, and that was huge difference for me when I arrived in Thailand, because like all that went away. I'm just a foreign guy. Like, I'm supposed to get my ass kicked by everybody. So who cares? Like, if you just go and try it, that's pretty noble, and people are embrace you, So it was such a different thing. Plus, nobody knew me. Nobody knew me. I didn't have to, fight and have a bunch of students show up. I fought for the ISKA Muay Thai title in Kentucky. And it was a huge, it was a big moment also. And I was stopped in I think it was the second round again. It was a doctor stoppage. I had a huge cut. And this fight was just completely going my way. It was just devastating. That ISK belt looks so beautiful. And that was my belt. I was minutes away from it. I was just catching this guy with his right hands. I mean, his head was on. It was too easy. And I clinched up with him, and he just pushed my head down to my shoulder, and his knee came up twice. Felt like a palm heel, so it didn't feel like much, but it just opened me up. I think it was 9 to put the muscle back in and 11 on the outside. So they stopped the fight, and I was devastated. I mean, I wanted to continue, and this guy went off to do a lot of good things in Thai boxing, mostly like Glory with Roman Deckers, John Wayne Parr. He worked with all those guys after. So that was a pretty devastating time. That was 2 titles. That was 2 title opportunities that didn't go my way.
During that time, you're elevating yourself, you're improving yourself, you're fighting for titles. Why did you decide, like, I need to leave? Why did you decide, like, I need to travel to Thailand to learn? Like, what was the moment? What was the turning point for that?
There was a lot of like personal stuff too, relationship stuff, and it was a bit of a way out of there too, I think. And the Thai boxing, I thought, how could I have a gym like and teach or claim that I'm teaching some Thai boxing or parts of that without having gone to the motherland? Like, I just thought it was like that was the way to legitimize yourself as a martial artist. That's was always the plan. Like, if you want to learn Taekwondo, you go to Korea, or you learn from the roots. You want to learn karate, you go to Okinawa. If you want to learn, like, and I felt like that was gonna be it for me. It wasn't like I was honestly chasing those belts. That just happened organically through the journey. I just wanted to be able to fight with real stuff and give that to students. I was so tired of already this sort of the dim mock, the energy flow, no touch knockouts. I was already like, that shit pissed me off. And I was like, and I'd spent a nice chunk of my life in different martial arts like that. I took things from it later, like I said, but I was a bit, frustrated. I thought, man, how much time was wasted, believing in certain things or taking that approach. Now it all makes total sense to me. But then, so Thailand was like, everybody knew that was the real deal. Anybody that was looking at kickboxing or Thai boxing, like, the Thai guys were just like far superior. So the idea wasn't to just go and fight. That was the last part of it. It was more like, hey, I need a vacation. This place looks amazing. Like, what is this crazy tropical island, Phuket? I called it Phuket at the time. Like, what's Phuket, man? This place is, and I thought, okay, cool. Not to mention the beaches, the landscape, all the wild stuff that I was Googling. I thought, cool, man. I'll go here, a couple of weeks of Muay Thai training. If these guys are like killing me, like I hear about the stories, they're like kickboxer shit, you're going to get paralyzed in the ring, they're going to put you in an alleyway. Like, I'll just go over there and learn. And if I can have a fight, cool. But that really was not the top priority. I may have said that, but inside, no way. I was like, yeah, man, I'm just going to go learn. So that's when I started to look up things. And like I said, I only found, I believe it was like Lana Muay Thai, maybe Horizon. I can remember Horizon was like I think Horizon ended up being the World Muay Thai Council, the WMC camp on Koh Samui. Unfortunately, I couldn't find that site again. And I ended up finding Phuket Muay Thai and Rawai Muay Thai. So yeah, that was the whole journey. And I reached out, and Danny Averson was an Aussie guy who reached right back out to me, and it was super cool, answering all those really crazy questions I still answer today, which drive me crazy. You know, just stupid stuff that I was like, is there a hospital like around? Is there like, do I need shots? Or, you know, it's just all that stuff. And he was super patient. And Danny had already been, you know, living in Thailand, I think, for a few years. And yeah, that's how it all happened. So I book a ticket. I asked Aaron Fisher, the guy that runs Kings, I mentioned earlier. I said, hey Aaron, can you go out, you know, go on this trip with me, and we'll do this together, and you can document some of it. I had like a little janky video camera, and I'm like, that'll be your thing. Like, you can document some of this trip. And I think I was going to pay for part of the trip. So Aaron and I, yeah, we booked. I think it was just a 2-week trip, which lasted a long time. He went back, but I didn't. I didn't go back. I stayed.
When you bought the ticket, what did you have to do to prepare yourself to go to Thailand? Did you sell your place, or did you have your guy run it for you while you were gone, thinking
Yes.
that you were going to go back?
Yeah, the plan was like to come home for sure. You know, I didn't even see that far ahead. It was just like, we'll be gone for a couple of weeks. Dean was always like my right hand, you know, as far as helping run the gym and stuff. And you know, he was local. He was very like, I could rely on him. I could trust him completely. So yeah, there was no plans of like selling stuff like that, you know. Um, I had a little bit of money saved up, and I think the folks helped me a little bit. Can't remember exactly, but I was very limited on a budget. It was very, very budgeted. Like, now I think back, I probably couldn't last a week in Thailand on a budget like that. Um, but you know, it was 41 baht to the dollar then. So, you know, it went quite far compared to what it does now. Um, yeah, man. So that was it. You know, once I decided, I thought it would be a bit of a training holiday, which that was my thing. Like I said, you know, I'm going to go to a new place, whether it's Iowa, whether it's this state, train with these guys, get a little experience, and just start to build this like this really nice resume that you know, I train with a lot of legit fighters and coaches. So that Thailand was just one that I wanted to knock off the list and come home. Once I got there, man, it took me, you know. The island, you've been to Phuket many times. It's very different now. I'm not sure how long ago you arrived there, but the development of that island is insane. I'd say like 5 to 6 years just exploded with hotels and businesses. And I mean, the gyms came a little bit later, all these gyms, but man, it was incredible. This was paradise. This was like heaven on earth. A kid coming from the Marine Corps, pretty rough place, to living in this gym in Toledo, a pretty rough place, but still much nicer than waking up on a tropical island, you know, where everybody's smiling at you and everything's real like eccentric, and the food and I mean, man, fresh fish and chicken. Just the diet that I changed alone when I moved there, my body changed drastically. Like, my health and my body, and like it was really cool. And yeah, I couldn't think of anywhere else in the world where you could just focus on fighting. Like, this is what you could do and be. Nothing like the States, where you juggled like all these other things. Like, you were a fighter and you promoted yourself and you were your manager. There was no management companies. There was no like sports agents for kickboxing and knockdown karate, you know. You did all that. You dealt with like the promoters, you dealt with all that on the background. Other than Cung helping me out originally with it, initially he did that for me, and I got paid quite well actually for those fights. Like, thinking back, I mean, I've gotten paid way less later on in bigger fights. So Cung helped with that part, but I took all that over. So when I get to a real Thai gym where you just wake up, eat, sleep, train, and then when you're not training, there's like Nai Harn Beach, or there's like great food and awesome things to do, or looking at elephants or monkeys in a safari. It was just like, for me, coming from the Midwest, even with that military experience, it was pretty mind-blowing for sure. Excuse me.
All right, man. Well, we're gonna shut it down because we're gonna start part 3 with you landing in Phuket and starting to visit the gyms that are already there. which are not many, but yeah, man. I don't know. We might go back to a couple things in the third part, but I think you covered almost everything. Like your
Yeah.
title fights, and it's all part of your story. You know what I mean? Like your title fights that you took, and then it didn't go your way, but now you're gonna go to the motherland, so-called motherland, and start your journey over there. And we'll talk about that in part 3. So, man, it's always good, man.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you again for having me on, and I hope everybody enjoys this. It's gonna get pretty wild. I can tell you that. So
Yeah, I think part 3 is when the crazy stuff starts happening, right?
yeah, for sure. It's just a whole new life, whole new world, and a whole new education. We should just call that the University of Thailand part.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
that was my school. But yeah, thanks again, man, for having me, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
No doubt, man. We'll talk soon, and everybody that is watching this one, go back if you haven't watched part 1. Part 1 is pretty interesting too, man. There's some funny stories there and some educational parts of your life. So it's especially I enjoyed the parts about Okinawa, man.
Yeah.
That's some fun stuff right there.
You
So
got
if you
you
yeah.
pulled that out of me. I haven't talked about that in years, man. So you pulled that out of me quite well. And it's brought up some really awesome memories and yeah. So maybe the last part I can get some pictures and stuff out to you and we can post some stuff up because I'm finding all this stuff and I'm digging up all this stuff and if anybody's out there that wants to see any of that, I'm totally up for showing all those things.
Yeah,
So
definitely. If you do have some photos of anything, just send them to me. And then
okay,
when I repost things, like say I'll repost part 1, I'll just throw up the photos, just kind of give someone a visual aspect of what you're
cool.
talking about. That'll be very cool. Thank you so much, Sean.
All right.
And
Thank you.
we're gonna talk soon, man. Let's keep in
Okay.
contact.
All right, buddy. See you. See you.
All right, man. That's